His first garden was not much bigger than a grave. At boarding school in Brienne-le-Château, between the ages of 9 and 15, Napoleone di Bonaparte was allocated a small plot of land. He could sit or lie down in it, learn to grow flowers and a few vegetables, nothing more. Other boys had similar allotments, lined up in rows like beds in dormitories or barracks. The school was one of 12 sponsored by the French state to prepare pupils for the military academy in Paris. It was run by monks, les Minimes de Brienne, who considered gardening an educative pastime, which would supplement the curriculum of French, Latin, mathematics, history, geography, music, drawing, and fencing. Some of the boys neglected their gardens, soon losing interest, letting them turn to dust or be overrun by brambles. But Bonaparte took enormous pride in his. Perhaps he had help from a kindly monk with horticultural expertise. Perhaps he did not need it after spending his early years in orchards and olive groves on Corsica. He spoke French poorly, with a thick Corsican accent. He pronounced his own name Napoleon, so his peers nicknamed him La Paille au nez, straw nose. He was homesick. He missed his parents and their house in Ajaccio, the room he was born in, and the gardens he had played in with his siblings before being sent away to school. To be deprived of your childhood room, of the garden in which you roamed in your early years, not to have a personal home, is to have no homeland, he later claimed. He longed for the Corsican terrain, sea, sky, and climate. The winters in Champagne were hard. But once they were over, gardening helped him feel better. He was a scholarship boy from a modest but aristocratic family. If he had a small amount of pocket money, he used it to improve his garden, to screen it with fencing or shrubs, and cultivate flowers in his hours of recreation. Within 2 years, he created an arbor, a green sanctuary where he could read and be alone. The fact of this first garden is not robust. It has been passed down through the memoirs of people claiming to remember Bonaparte, before he simplified his name to Bonaparte, and long before he became Napoleon, Emperor of the French. Like most hints about the early lives of the famous or infamous, the idea of Bonaparte gardening at school has been embellished. Some suggest that Bonaparte's appropriative and expansionist ambitions were already evident when he took over the neglected plots on either side of his own and tripled the size of his garden. In the book based on his failed play about Napoleon, the novelist and playwright Alexandre Dumas, whose father was a general in Napoleon's army, imagined him alone in his garden, arranging pebbles in military order. When one of the other boys climbed the fence to spy on him and laugh at his pastime, Bonaparte responded by throwing a stone at the intruder, who carried a scar on his forehead from the wound for the rest of his life. 25 years later, Dumas' story goes, when the Emperor Napoleon was at the peak of his power, he recognized his former schoolfellow as a general-in-chief that I struck on the head. Dumas was building on the memoirs of Louis-Antoine Fauvelet de Bourrienne, who was born the same year as Bonaparte in 1769, was at school with him in Brienne-le-Château, and afterwards became his private secretary. Bourrienne's accuracy and veracity have long been questioned, not least because he relied on ghostwriters to turn his notes into published memoirs. While Bourrienne mentioned Bonaparte's enjoyment of outdoor recreation and his dismay when snowfall prevented him from gardening, he did not suggest that the fence Bonaparte erected was tall and substantial enough to be scaled by a schoolboy, or that inside that fence Bonaparte was already practicing for war, marshalling pebbles like soldiers. Another story has Bonaparte retreating into his garden as the 25th of August 1784 approached, and the whole school became excited about preparing for the Festival of Saint-Louis, a feast day celebrated by pupils across France. The monks allowed boys who were 14 or over to buy small amounts of gunpowder to use in miniature cannon and pistols. No one spoke of anything else. Guns and petards were cleaned in anticipation. A banner celebrating the 30-year-old Reforminded king who had been crowned in 1774 was strung across the facade of the school, proclaiming "À Louis le XVI, notre Père," to Louis XVI, our father. But on the day itself, Bonaparte played no part in the celebrations. He had recently turned 15. He could have sourced some gunpowder and joined in with his peers, but instead he chose to spend time in his garden. That evening, around 9 p.m., he was disturbed by a party of 20 or so boys who had crowded into an adjacent plot to set off a firework. Embers fell from the sky and ignited a box of gunpowder on the ground, which exploded and caused a stampede into Bonaparte's garden. He was enraged at the destruction, all the trampled plants and flowers, and chased the intruders back out of his plot, brandishing a gardening tool like a pike. With the benefit of hindsight, Bonaparte's refusal to join in with the festival of Saint Louis had been interpreted as an early indication of his Republican sympathies. Strawnose was a child from Corsica who resented the French monarchy for conquering his native island.